Community Development Committee for the Metropolitan Council. It's September 3rd, 2004. I'm the chair of this committee, Councilmember Robert Lilligren, joined by a quorum of the committee. Council members, we have an interesting agenda today. The last part, the information part, is actually workshopping, and so we'll get down and do a little more work.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Shut up.
Turn the ball, yeah.
Push pause on the.
Or push pause, right, either or. Cool. I'll pause for a second.
Thank you.
Yeah, no sweat. It happens to.
Chair Lilligren in stereo.
One of me is bad enough, right?
Obviously, they have it on delay, so if we need to be beeped.
Cool. All right. So committee members, Councilmember Johnson, oh, there she's back. So cool. All right. I think we move forward. We have an agenda before us. If there's no additions or changes, we can consider that approved. It's approved. Then next on the agenda is approval of the August 19th, 2024 Community Development Committee minutes. Is there a motion to approve, please?
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf and Councilmember Vento. Any discussion, additions, changes, corrections? Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next is two items on our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Discussion on that? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The consent agenda carries. Now we'll move on to our non-consent business items. We have three of them today. The first is item 2024-234. These are funding recommendations for the 2024 Round 2 Livable Communities Act pre-development grants. And Mr. Martin is here to present. Welcome.
All right, thank you. I am Marcus Martin, and I will be presenting the round 2 of the pre-development grants, as the chair said. Thank you for putting this item on your agenda today. I'll start with some brief background about the Livable Communities Act. All of the Livable Communities programs, grant programs, share some goals, including creating more housing choices throughout the region, supporting the growth of living wage jobs, improving connections between where people live or work and regional amenities like parks, and support for more equitable development outcomes. LCA's pre-development grants are for applicants who are in the early stages of a physical development or a redevelopment project that has the potential to advance LCA goals and Thrive 2040 goals, soon to be imagined 2050 goals. Pre-development grants are intended for projects that need to complete additional work to fully shape the details and detail the final development. These grants typically include a range of activities, including, but not limited to, financial feasibility analysis of various building, construction, or site design studies, infrastructure engineering, concept planning, and community engagement, to name a few. So here are some pictures of past projects shown on the slide. As part of the fund distribution plan adopted back in February 2024, the council approved up to $2 million for LCA pre-development grants to be awarded in 2 application rounds, with $1 million available in each funding opportunity. We are also recommending using the anticipated $50,000 remaining balance of funding from the policy grant program that Hannah Gary will present next. On July 22, 9 pre-development applications were received for funding round 2. The applications were reviewed by an interdisciplinary team of council staff. And today, shown in highlight there, the funding recommendation is being presented here at CDC and scheduled for final approval by the full council on September 11. Applications are scored on 2 evaluation categories: project outcomes and how they meet LCA and Thrive goals, and project process, which includes community engagement and representation of the community being served by the project. Applications need to receive 20 out of the 30 available points to be eligible for funding. All right, let's look at the applications. We received 9 applications requesting a total of 1.4 million. All 9 of the applications met the minimum score for funding. Each city can receive up to $300,000 in pre-development awards each round. So staff is recommending grants be awarded to 7 projects, starting with Remnant, $150,000, The Resolute, $150,000, Loeffler Crossing pre-development, $293,500, Penn Station, $100,000, East Side Tennis and Community Center, $100,000. And continuing, we are also recommending funding for Ham's Brewery West End, $200,000, and Blaine, $56,500. 2 of the 4 projects in Minneapolis are not being recommended for funding because the maximum award limit per city was already met. There we go. The staff recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council awards 7 Livable Communities Act pre-development grants totaling $1,050,000 as shown in Table 1 of the business item, and authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, for your report and for your work on this. I also see that there are some of the applicants and some old friends here in the audience today, so thank you for being here and thanks for your partnership. Any questions on that report? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the Richfield one and the 2 St. Paul ones, it said they had previous pre-development grants. Were they for different parts of the same parcel, or did they not accomplish what they thought they were going to accomplish, or why are they needing more pre-development grants?
Yes, in Richfield's case, it was they had a change in the developer and the development concept, and they acquired additional land, and so they're basically starting over for this concept. So they relinquished a portion of their prior grant. So I was showing just part the experiment. And I'm sorry, the other was?
The 2 St. Paul ones.
Oh, the 2 St. Paul ones, yes. So the St. Paul ones, there was some pre-development funding for this. It's a more complicated site with 2 sides, a new construction on the east side of the project and adaptive reuse on the west side. So they did receive some initial funding for doing the concept work for what is the subject of this request. However, now they're going for the historic tax credits, which take a lot more detailed construction drawings to qualify for, so they have asked for supplemental funding. That is the Hams one. Now, the East Side Tennis, that was the subject of a few different project concept tries, so we're trying now something different. This is a concept for more of a community center public use, different from some of the prior mixed-use concepts that weren't financially feasible before.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Also wanted to commend Blaine for their work on maintaining their manufactured home parks. That's desperately needed, and I wish we could fully fund them because I've wondered for a long time why we aren't doing a better job of helping people update or replace their outdated manufactured homes, because it's an important part of our ownership, affordable housing.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I'll note you've been joined by Councilmembers Chambliss and Dolkar as well. Thanks for being here. Further discussion? Yeah, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On that note, I was going to ask the question about the scoring for Blaine, and was it simply that it landed at 20 in scoring, even though Minneapolis had ones higher, but I got the rationale for them not getting granted on this round, but they requested 175 and got 56,500. Why such a small amount compared to their ask, and especially as you compare it to the other asks on the list?
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson. Yes, in this case, we fully fund the requests up in range of priority. And so in this case, because they were the lowest ranking project, they're receiving the balance of funding available. We're recommending the balance of funding available.
And Mr. Chair, just to follow up, can you explain to me too where what category or categories that they dropped off and didn't do as well as the others?
Mr. Martin.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, yes. So in terms of this particular project, because it is focusing exclusively on the housing preservation, for example, any points attributed to job growth were not awarded to this site. There were also cases where, because they're looking right now at preservation of the asset, we didn't have as much points to give in areas of kind of density increase, sustainability, some of these other features that we look for.
Mr. Chair, just a quick follow-up.
Councilmember.
And so is this grant opportunity just kind of out of the gate designed for either redevelopment or new development just because of those points you made, and harder when it's a preservation piece? And part two of that is there another area that Blaine could come in as it relates to preservation, knowing how important preservation of affordable housing is across the region? Is that something that we prioritize in other grants or areas that would push something like this to the top of the list, especially around preservation?
Mr. Martin.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, yes, I think that, the balance between new construction and preservation has been something that we have struggled with at times in our criteria. But at the beginning of the year, the way this one was set up, it was intended to be rather neutral, but we're finding that a project like this one is a bit unusual because it's so focused on just preservation without growth, that this one ended up being lower than perhaps we expected.
Yes. And thank you, Mr. Chair, I understand that. And so I think, when we, again, we always know there's never enough money to meet all the needs. But this one, again, kind of struck me. I've got at least 2 mobile home parks, maybe 3 in my district, and I know that it is incredibly hard to keep them, to Councilmember Wolf's point, at a standard that, it's really livable, and there are some amenities and things that, everyday people should have in their lives. So I look at this and I kind of struggle a bit on the amount that's being awarded, but I understand you're working off a scoring grid and kind of the goal of this money. But again, maybe when a bit of an anomaly shows up, it just piques my interest as to, I'm glad they're getting something. I just know that how important this is given, the fact it's just another important type of housing that's needed and maintained in the region. So I was kind of bummed out when I saw that one.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I will note that the information part of our agenda today is to workshop Livable Communities Act program, right? So we'll have some opportunity to maybe shape this around some of the interests that are being expressed today. Further discussion on the report, Councilmember Bento.
I was just going to second, Mr. Chair, what both Councilmember Wolf and Councilmember Johnson said. I think that what we've learned today gives us an opportunity to really think outside the box and do something with this, because these residences, as was said so well by both of my colleagues, are critical, and particularly critical for people. When I think of the manufactured homes that are in my old district and my new district, that's workforce housing. And if we lose those homes, I'm not sure where those folks will go. It really is alarming. So I think we need to really stretch our minds on this when we get to the information section of the agenda.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilmember. Yeah, thank you. Any further questions or discussions on the report? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. Discussion on the motion? Committee members, before I call for a vote, I'm going to ask for please a moment of point of personal privilege, and just to recognize that we're joined from the City of Minneapolis, Community Planning, Economic Development Department, a long-term employee and colleague, Mark Garner, who's here with interest in, I believe it's the Resolute, correct? No, 927. Oh, 927. So thank you for being here. And I just want to note, I just worked with them for decades now, really, during my time on Minneapolis City Council, and then in my day job as well. He supports the work of the Native American Community Development Institute and some of our activation of the American Community College Corridor. And so I know that you're stepping toward retirement, and so I really appreciate your being here. And I appreciate all the work that you've done, so thanks. Cool. Discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to the funding recommendations for round 2 of the Livable Communities Act Policy Development Grants for 2024, and Ms. Hannah Gary will present. Welcome, Ms. Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, council members. I am Hannah Gary. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a planning analyst in community development. And today I'm presenting the funding recommendation for the 2024 Livable Communities Act Policy Development Grants. I will go over this fairly quickly since Marcus just went over the Livable Communities goals. Several goals shared across all of our programs: create more housing choice, support living wage jobs, environmental sustainability, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, improving connections, and creating more equitable development outcomes. So the Policy Development Program provides support for locally adopted policies that have an impact on physical development in the city. This is part of our effort to support more cities at a variety of stages and in multiple ways. As part of the fund distribution plan that was adopted in February of 2024, the Council approved up to $200,000 for LCA policy development grants to be awarded in 2 application rounds, with $100,000 being available in each funding opportunity. On July 22nd, we received 1 policy development application for round 2, and the application was reviewed by an interdisciplinary team of council staff. And here we are, September 3rd at the CDC meeting, and this is scheduled to go to the full council on September 11th. Applications are scored on 3 evaluation categories: outcomes, which is how well the policy outcomes will align with council goals; process, which is the analysis of the impact that the policy will have; and the team, which is either the scope of work with the consultant or the criteria that the city will use to select the consultant. And this scoring process has yielded a staff recommendation for the 2024 policy development funding opportunity, and that is that the Metropolitan Council award 1 Livable Communities Act policy development grant totaling $50,000. This is a summary of the application being recommended for funding. The City of Hugo requested $50,000, and staff are recommending fully funding the request at $50,000. The $50,000 remaining from this round has been added to the pre-development account. So the City of Hugo is looking to update their zoning code to allow for more density in mixed-use areas, better clarify density requirements, and streamline the development process for multifamily developments. The city will also be studying how they can include more environmental sustainability measures into their building requirements. Again, the city is requesting $50,000 to work with a consultant on developing their new code. Staff are recommending fully funding this request, and this will be the first award that Hugo has received since 2011. And once again, the recommendation before you today is that the Metropolitan Council award 1 Livable Communities Act policy development grant totaling $50,000. and I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Gary, just a quick question. Maybe you said this, and I apologize if I missed it. Was Hugo the sole applicant this round for these funds?
Yes, for this round, Hugo was the only applicant. We did have conversations with Little Canada, Chaska, and Matamidi, and it came down to timing. And Hugo was the only applicant that came through this
Okay,
round.
thanks. In the last round of these funds, we had more applicants.
Yes, we did. We had 3 applicants. We were oversubscribed last round.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you. Questions or discussion? Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question. I just have a shout out. Hugo's a remarkable community. I got to represent Hugo during my first term on the council, and they're very collaborative. They're very community focused. They've done a great job in terms of diversity of housing and excellent job in terms of environmental issues, water projects, everything. It's a great community, and they're very deserving of this grant. It will be well spent.
Thank you, Councilmember Vento. Further discussion, Councilmember Carter.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that, as well as to state that I'm very, very encouraged by their application and by their goals, and expect that in their moving through the process and working toward some solutions here, they can show an example also to other communities who are struggling with these issues. And so if staff played a part in encouraging this, thank you. I really appreciate the work that you're doing to make certain questions are answered, and those others who were looking to apply should hopefully be in our next round. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Vento, then Councilmember Johnson.
Just very briefly, I should have noted this before, but I want to add that Hugo's done a great job in terms of affordable housing. The old Catholic Church rectory is now a residence for folks who are struggling with housing. They've partnered with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity to build a number of homes. So they've really stretched the boundaries for a small community, and they've taken the lead in many respects. The other thing that they do that I really valued during my time on the council is every fall they do a tour of the community, and they invite the Met Council member, the legislators, local committee members, new members of the community. They do a bus tour, and then you go back to the city hall and you have a pizza lunch, and you talk about what you saw and what you liked and what you hope for in the future. And they show their parks, they show their new facilities. And as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, sometime it might not be a bad idea for us to do a field trip to a community like Hugo to kind of get a sense of what the rest of the region is like. So just a suggestion.
Thanks, Councilmember Vento, for sharing. Further discussion, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, so Hannah, we had 4 in the first round, did you say?
I believe we had 3.
3, okay.
I
No,
can
and it's
confirm
fine.
that.
It just, we were oversubscribed.
Yes, we were.
And we do this twice a year, and those are always dates that are certain, correct? And we put out those notices. But we didn't see any of the ones that weren't successful in the first round come back in the second. And I imagine that might be because of timing with the project. I don't know. Do you know why we didn't see any of those come back? Or in, just generally what you notice when, they miss something and they don't come back? Do we know why?
Chair, Councilmember Johnson, all of the the applications that came through last round, even though we were oversubscribed, we were able to give everyone partial funding. So everyone has gotten some funding towards their policy goals. In conversation with Matamidi, they applied, I believe, year before last, and we're looking to come back for further funding to support additional policy development. So in terms of the cities who received partial awards, I haven't had additional conversation with those cities about coming back for this round, but I can certainly follow up with them and check on progress and see if they intend to apply in future rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that'd be great. And you've got a lot on your plate. Just, checking back and making sure that, hey, there's still money left over. So this will be made available then in the next round of 2025? Or how does that, I can't remember how that floats, that money that's not been allocated.
Ms. Gary.
That's a great question. The additional $50,000 was moved over to pre-development for this round. So that additional $50,000 was helping to support that Blaine application for this year.
Okay.
So we just awarded that.
And we did it, though, ahead of this. Okay. All right. Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I know we've done that before, where we've had money from one that we could move elsewhere. And I just want to make sure that the integrity of where the money was placed is still maintained when we do that. So that's it. But thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Councilmember. And then we'll have the opportunity with the with 2025 fund distribution plan to reallocate into this account, which I think is great. I think this is a really good way of supporting communities and developing new policy. So cool. Any further questions on the report? If not, I would entertain a motion that the Metropolitan Council award One Livable Communities Act Policy Development Grant totaling $50,000. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Vento. Councilmember Wolf. Discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that carries. Thank you, Ms. Geary, for your work on this. And our final non-consent business item of the evening is item 2024-242. It's to amend a grant term for the 927 building LCA development. And Nicole Clapp is here to present. Welcome, Ms. Clapp.
Hello, thank you. Chair Lilligren and council members of the Community Development Committee. My name is Nicole Clapp, and I'm the grants manager for the CDMTS Finance and Administration Unit. My pronouns are she, her. And the action up for your consideration today is that the Community Development Committee approve amending the 927 building LCA development grant to extend the term by an additional 6 months to June 30th of 2025. We do have representatives from the city of Minneapolis and their development partners in the audience that are here to provide answers to any additional questions that you may have. Okay, so a little background on this project. The city of Minneapolis was awarded a $981,816 Livable Communities Demonstration Account Development Grant in December of 2019 for the 927 building project. The project will add a 3-story addition to an existing commercial building on West Broadway Avenue, including offices and space for community-based organizations whose missions support the economic vitality of the community. The plan includes amenities for a community plaza, electric vehicle charging stations, and public art. This project is creating 76 full-time living wage jobs and is leveraging over $8.5 million in other funding. So a little summary of the grant eligible activities and awarded amounts. There have been small administrative budgetary shifts from the original award that the council would, that the CDC would have seen. It's been less than 20%, so those adjustments were accomplished administratively. This slide reflects the current budget allocation. The grant funding for this project was distributed across site preparation and utility expenses that have been completed, and the design, engineering, and construction for placemaking spaces, public art, bike racks, photovoltaic cells, and other public amenities that constitute the final project deliverables. On August 1st, the City of Minneapolis requested an additional 6-month extension. The first phase of this project, including the construction and renovation of the historical building, has been completed. However, the parking lot and site plan improvements, which constitute Phase 2, have experienced significant delays due to a variety of factors, including supply chain, inflation, and the necessary redesign of the parking lot after failure to secure the vacation of the alley behind the building. The project has now secured land sale approval for an additional parcel that was previously identified as part of the Phase 3 development plans. The addition of this parcel is enabling the expansion of the development project and subsequent completion of Phase 2. Construction on Phase 2 will be underway late summer, and with the new parcel, we'll add an additional 19 parking spaces, including 2 accessible parking spaces, and improve the layout of the site amenities that make up the remaining grant activities. As previously stated, the grantee is requesting an additional 6-month extension to complete the project. In terms of the significance finding, this extension request does exceed the 5-year maximum grant term allowed in current policy, therefore requiring CDC approval to extend beyond that term. The project, grant-eligible activities, and deliverables are unchanged. The grantee has demonstrated project advancement, and council staff feel confident that with the additional time, the project will be delivered as described, and in fact, with some improvements to planned amenities. Therefore, Mr. Chair, we ask that the Community Development Committee approve extending the term of the 927 Building Development Grant by an additional 6 months to June 30th, 2025, as detailed in this report. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Clapp, for the report. And although I don't represent this area anymore, like Councilmember Bento, I did last term. And I'm very when we first saw this development, I'm very supportive of this extension. My understanding from being briefed on this is it's, this is happening. And so, so there isn't a huge amount of risk, but I do have one kind of question. Maybe you can just kind of fill in a little bit here. But you mentioned that one of the issues that caused some delay was the inability to vacate the alley. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering if you can just tell me a little about it. I mean, it seems like it's a city goal, right? City of Minneapolis, to promote this development. So I'm just wondering what the dynamic around the refusal to vacate the alley was.
And
Thanks.
I will defer to my colleagues in the audience who could maybe provide a bit more context about the history of that aspect.
Mr. Garner, welcome. Yeah. Welcome. And thank you for your persistence on this project.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. My name's Mark Garner. I'm a senior project coordinator in CPED Business Development.
Maya Beecham, Program Director of Economic Ecosystem with the J. and Rose Phillips Family Foundation, which is the owner of the 927 Building LLC.
Okay. And the question concerned the history of a requested alley vacation, and Maya, I'll ask you this.
Sure. So our neighbor is a community-owned property. Our neighbor owns a community-owned property right next door. And so we asked our neighbor if we could have an alley vacation so that we can expand for our plaza.
Sure.
And just in protection of her own property, she preferred that we not do that. And so we had no choice but to respect her,
right.
her wishes, and the city, they also felt the same way.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I was just curious, so thank you for that. Committee members, any questions or discussion? Councilmember Wolf.
This whole process is new to me. I don't recall us having the council extend something beyond the maximum grant term before. Is that in the rules, or where did that come from?
Director Barajas.
Actually, I think Nicole would be a great person to answer
great.
this.
All right, Ms.
I
Clapp,
asked
please.
the same thing when these came forward, and she's like, in fact, we do have some history here.
Yes,
Ms.
Chair,
Clapp.
Councilmember Wolf. It is in the policy that the maximum term is 5 years, but we do have precedent. There's about a half a dozen examples in recent history, probably going back about 10 years, where CDC has approved an extension beyond 5 years. And in fact, most of those have been for much lengthier extensions, at least a year, and in a couple of instances, 2 years. So by comparison, this is a relatively short additional amount of time.
Thank you for that history. Yeah.
Just
Councilmember
one more.
Wolf, then Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember.
Having the picture of the layout is helpful, but it would be nice if we had pictures of how it looks done, of what's done so far, and what the plan, how the parking lot stuff is going to be laid out, rather than just the before picture, basically.
We can certainly follow up with some of that information.
Mm-hmm.
Happy to forward.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Councilmember Johnson, then Councilmember Carter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually at least pulled up what it at one point looks like. I don't know, because I haven't driven by there lately, but I know, now I know which corner we're at. And my question is, it says that you've secured the ability to, or secured, or what was the wording used in the report?
Land sale approval.
So is our contract in hand? Have you got the contract signed, or is it a verbal, or it's moving in the right direction, or where are you at to make sure it really happens?
In late June, the city council approved the sale, actually a land write-down of the 1828 parcel, which is the third parcel that will be part of the expanded site improvements and the parking lot. We executed a redevelopment agreement, which is the purchase agreement for that property, about 3 weeks ago, and we're in the final stages of preparing for closing.
Okay, thank you. And was it 927 LLC or whatever? Sorry, that was the one who then purchased the property?
Yes, and that's a wholly owned LLC of the Phillips Family Foundation.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, just one quick thing too.
Councilmember Johnson.
So on those points of precedence, was any of that COVID related? You know, just the whole world just changed immensely when COVID hit. Do you know if, or, you know, was it the Great Recession, or, you know, or was it, I'm trying to, you know, maybe align what those precedents might be, rather than just the time of how much they were extending, but what was it that caused the need for the extension?
Sure,
Ms. Blair.
Councilmember Johnson. They are not all COVID-related. I would say, so of the about half a dozen, roughly 2 of them have been since 2019, but the others were prior to that. So it's for a variety of getting together a funding stack, having partners exit the project, new partners enter. I could certainly get you a summary of those particular projects that have had those extensions if you're curious about what the nature was, but they kind of run the gamut of.
If it's not too much digging,
sure,
that'd be just nice to know. And have we ever said no to an extension like this, Mr. Chair?
Lap or Director Barajas?
Mr. Chair, council members, we certainly have had communities relinquish their dollars. I don't know that we've ever advised them to bring forward a request when they haven't started a project. And we said, really? Are you going to do that? So you wouldn't have probably seen, or this council would not have seen a request for an extension if we didn't think it was feasible, especially if they hadn't started the project or weren't close to starting that project.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, just briefly, and how many of these do we grant over a 10-year period of time?
Ms. Scott?
Chair and Councilmember Johnson, how many extensions beyond 5 years?
And just the original grant itself, meaning that how many grants with the 5-year limit?
So all of our grants have a 5-year
All
limit
do.
built into the grants agreement contracts and built
Okay.
into the policy for LCA programs. And it's pretty common, so the original grant term is anywhere from 1 to 3 years. 3 years is the most common at the initiation of the grant. And it's very, very frequent that we amend them to add the extra 2 years.
Okay.
So it's very common that they go up to the 5-year.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, that's kind of what I was getting at. If that's becoming the norm, maybe that's something that this committee could look at in the future too. We've got some anecdotal, you know, evidence and data behind it to just, you know, for future, to just kind of go, are we pacing ourselves correctly in this 3 to 4 to 5? And, you know, what are those, if we stay here, you know, what are those precedents so that we know we've kind of got some parameters around that too. So I'm just thinking prospectively.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Further discussion, Councilmember Carter.
I will be supporting the motion, and the questions have been asked that provide the information I was looking for. Clearly, we have a period when we think these projects should be able to wrap up. Not everything is an apple. Some things are oranges, and we have an administrative process for extending. And then if they need to extend beyond the maximum, you've brought it to the council. I'd agree the question about how frequently we do that, within what period of time, and whether we should be changing the norm is appropriate. But thank you, I appreciate the project, the time that is taken to get it complete, that you have not requested time beyond what you truly believe is needed, and wish you the very best should this motion pass. Thank you.
We're here. Councilmember Carter, can I take that as a motion to approve the proposed?
You could do that.
Thank you. Is there a
So I'll
second?
make that motion.
Second.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Congratulations. Good luck with your project.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to seeing it completed. Yeah. Committee members, that concludes our business items for today. We have sort of a workshop format that we're going to move into to discuss Livable Communities Act program updates. I know Ms. Berkey is going to lead us in this, or who's going to kick this off? It might get a little less formal in here as we go forward.
Yeah. Chair, council members, I am not leading this, but I am Sarah Berkey. I'm the Senior Manager for Livable Communities and Housing, and I just wanted to introduce our consultants who are here today and ready to take the lead on the next part of the agenda. We're really happy to have Ellen Waters and Mary Kay Bailey with us. Some of you know them, and I think you all heard that we hired them recently, so now you'll get to meet them, and we're just here to listen and look forward to it. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks.
Hello.
Ms. Berkey, welcome, Ms. Waters, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you. It's lovely to be with you all on this summer afternoon in Minnesota. So I'm Ellen, and this is Mary Kay. And as Ms. Berkey indicated, we have been asked by the council to help kind of do an assessment of the Livable Communities Act program. And that involves a lot of research and data. It also involved talking to most of you. I think we were able to speak with 7 of the members of the CDC, and really trying to help you all continue to be good stewards of the program going into the future, particularly 2025 and beyond. And so today we are fortunate to have some time on your agenda, and we're going to put you to work because what's been clear to us in our assessment so far is that there are a lot of questions and there are a lot of options. We need to figure out what's going to make the most sense. What can ensure that this highly successful program continues to provide the impact that it has for nearly 30 years. And so we're going to we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what we've heard, a little bit of data based on what you have. It's not showing up. Well, I don't know why it's not showing up.
Does Greg have the?
I'm not
Greg, do you
trained
have
on
the
the
slides
PowerPoint.
available
They're on that.
on the monitor? Oh, here we go.
Okay, good. All right. That was not part of our brief to be technical advisors, so apologize for that. At any rate, we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of grounding you in some quantitative data, looking at impact and the context, awards and participation. We're going to then talk a little bit about what we've heard from a variety of stakeholders, especially you all, and then we're going to move into really discussion around some of the key tensions that have been identified that are going to help shape our work over the next 30 days, because we're going to come back to see you on October 7th. So I hope you like us today, because you're going to see us again even then. So we're going to move pretty fast. We're hoping that you had a chance to read this in advance, so we're not going to be reading slides to you. So, but feel free to raise your hand, interrupt for points of clarification. And now we're going to just quickly, the slides are really slow. But anyway, we were asked to really identify a couple things. As I said, look at how the program could evolve for 2025 and beyond, ensure that there is alignment with the Imagine 2050, which you all, as the council, have released for public comment, and the overall objectives of the LCA. Promote widespread program participation. We heard a lot about the desire for more cities to take advantage of this and look at what is preventing them from taking advantage of the program. So those were kind of the scope of what we were asked to do. As I said, that involved a lot of assessment of information, synthesizing a lot of data and detail over the course of the last 30 years, but especially the last 10 years. And then we'll come back with a comprehensive report that includes recommendations, strengths, weaknesses, and areas of opportunity. We are in the midst of that, so we are roughly halfway through. So we've mostly been kind of behind the scenes, delving into information. We've watched some of your council meetings and committee meetings. We've read through lots of annual reports and other surveys and interviews that staff has done. They've done a terrific job over the last couple of years, really trying to understand from the city and developer and county stakeholder perspective what they think of the program, and for the most part, people really like the program. There are areas that people have want to see improvement and change, but people like this. It's a good program. And so all of that has kind of brought us to this point where we have a set of information, some of which we're going to share with you. And then as Chair Lilligren said, we're going to put you to work and kind of workshop. So what is that telling us? What is that telling you? What direction would you like to provide as we go forward? So to kind of level set us, Mary Kay is going to share some of the information, some of which you all said to us in our conversations that you were interested in seeing and hearing. So some of this I'm sure you've seen before, some of it may be new. Part of the value of us as objective outside consultants is that we bring a fresh viewpoint. So we've asked staff a ton of questions over the last 6 weeks saying, well, what does this mean? Give us this piece of data. And so this is going to represent sort of our interpretation and our findings on the impact and the participation and who's received awards and so forth. So with that, I'll have Mary Kay start off.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us today. So as Ellen mentioned, as part of our work, we've been reviewing program data so that we could better understand overall impact, participation, and successful applications. Generally, we've been doing a 10-year look back to 2014 because that captures all of the Thrive MSP 2040 environment, plus that re-enrollment period that happened in 2021. The point of this first quantitative slide that we have is to provide a really high-level snapshot of what impact this program has had over the past 10 years. You can see that the funds that have been made available to projects have supported thousands of new and preserved units of housing at various affordability levels, while also creating thousands of new jobs. This outcome data is coming from applications, and it gets updated if a project is amended during the course of its development. And the LCA team that you have has lots of more detailed information about like what percentage of affordable housing need are these awards hitting, as well as other information. So the takeaway here is really, you've got a program that's delivering significant impact. So I know one area that was of interest specifically for this committee was around participation. And so we looked at all of the participation since 1996, and the number of municipalities participating has ranged from a low of 59 during the 2021 COVID era re-enrollment period to highs of 106, which was really in the first few years of the program's implementation when it was brand new. But historically, over that 28-year period, the average number would be 96. And at the moment, the program is at 80% of that average with 77 cities participating. So we wanted to take a deeper look at the recent re-enrollment period to better understand who wasn't re-upping. So in 2020, pre-re-enrollment, there were 97 municipalities participating. And on this slide, you can see by county how many in which cities did not re-enroll when the new period began in 2021. And as a percentage, Anoka and Washington counties had the largest number of cities that chose not to re-enroll, while counties like Scott and Ramsey had every city re-enroll during that time period. So what we wanted you all to spend some time on today, maybe about 3 minutes or so, is to take a minute to think about which cities that currently aren't enrolled you might expect to be participating. On the next slide that I'll share it right now, and that hopefully you have a easier to read version. We've pulled a list of all the municipalities that aren't currently enrolled in the LCA, and we've highlighted in red those communities that have had the most, that are in the top third of communities that have had the most residential and commercial permits in the past decade, which is an indicator that they are more likely to be a city that you could expect to want to be part of this program, since with the exception of the Policy Development Fund, the LCA is targeted toward development projects, so development needs to be happening there. So take a minute and look at this slide, and then we'd like to hear your thoughts about, are there cities that aren't participating that you would expect to be? And are there cities where you would like either the consultant team or staff to have a conversation with them about their participation? So I will pause for a second and
Thanks, Mary Kay.
great to
And I
hear from
would
you.
look to committee members, right, to the 2 discussion questions that you listed. Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, I'm very curious about whether or not there would be community profiles that you would expect would be applying versus just, the whole list of people, why are they on this list? And would there be a way to, look at certain demographics, for example, I don't know, high poverty but lack of affordable housing, or I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, to provide some additional context, Councilmember Chambliss, the communities that are highlighted in the red font, they have had the most residential building permits for new units at 60% AMI or less for rental projects, or 80% or less for ownership projects. And they also have had permits pulled for commercial projects that are aligned with LCA goals. So I guess we've kind of cheated a little and highlighted ones that seem like they could be potential candidates for more outreach about why they aren't choosing to participate.
I'm glad you asked that, because I wasn't clear based on the asterisks why they were highlighted, so that helps me a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Johnson, then Carter, then Bento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wow, this is very fascinating for me, because I'm quickly running through looking for my cities, right? And right out of the gate, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and one of them is Corcoran, which is that high development, 60% MI, affordable rented ownership thing. And it's not a surprise to me because they're on that growing edge. That's when you start to see them really start to plow through development applications coming in. So I'm surprised Dayton's not on that, quite frankly. I want to just check on that because Dayton, I think, is ahead of Corcoran, but they're still in development mode. And so, I think that, yes, those would be absolutely ones we should reach out to. And quite frankly, when we've had some meetings, I say, hey, and especially Corcoran, you guys should really be part of this. And one of their council members has been on LUAC. I'm looking at my council member who's an expert in LUAC here, who I have to find a replacement for him now. But I think it's, the numbers will be helpful. I mean, even having them see a list like this or having them just understand how we've kind of scored them and all these others in red to start with. And none of them surprise me because they're on that developing edge, right? It's happening to them. So 2 things I think are taking place, and this is me making an assumption as a former city person and maybe from some, I think I just think there's like trust in what's in it for us, and will we have a shot at any of this? They've got a lot on their plates too, I think, at that developing edge where maybe they don't always understand, and I don't mean this in a negative kind of way, but I mean just what's out there, and do they need consultants, and can they even afford to go try to even get money that they may or not get? I hear that in my conversations with my mayors at my monthly meetings. So I just want to put that out there. And then just for everything that's not in red, I mean, is there anything that we should be doing with the other communities? I mean, I know some of them certainly are coming through, but what can we try to say to the rest of the group? You know, here's an area that the Met Council might be helping you as it relates to some of our other goals that we have around land use, preservation, or future development, all of that. So I just put that out there because I'm actually surprised that I have, out of my 11 cities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of them, over half not participating. Oh, Medicine Lake is one of mine too. So that's 7. Sorry, Medicine Lake.
Thank you, Councilmember. On these discussion questions, Councilmembers Carter, then Vento, then Wolf. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. I too am very interested in still refining that profile, only from the perspective of understanding more deeply how we engage with all of these communities to do what Councilmember Johnson just suggested we should, which is encourage them to look at these programs and to align them with their plans and needs and thoughts, so that they can, if in fact it is a match, take advantage of it. You know, and then I also think about the but for. You know, as we do this work, we know that we want to make programs available that can help advance the work, the development to meet our goals, and that would not happen but for the resources that we provide. So I want to know more about those that are in the red in terms of how they are proceeding. You know, are they looking at other resources that make sense, you know, such that they're not coming to us? You know, maybe they are, maybe they're not, but I'd like to know more about that too. And then, to my mind, everybody on this list should be interested in helping us meet these goals. And so I am very, very interested in ensuring that we are able to capture for them and market to them, or at least outreach to them, the benefits of these programs, which again, if they match the but-for test, you know, are probably really, really for them. But they are not coming forward for some reason. I want to understand more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. That was my question as well, so I appreciate you asking it. And then I note that you state some of these communities don't have forecasted growth. And so I'm wondering, those are just kind of,
right.
for me, kind of, I don't want to, they're confusing, right? If they're not really eligible because they're not growing, or they're less, yeah. I don't know if we could refine that list a little or something.
Yeah.
Thanks. Further discussion, Councilmember Bento, then Wolf, then Johnson. Councilmember Bento.
Two communities kind of stand out for me on the list, and again, these are communities that were in my former district. The one I want to talk about first is landfall. A couple years ago, one of my nieces was on her way home from Chicago with her husband and went by the landfall that landfall city sign on 94 going westbound, and said out loud, and then later said to her father, my brother, landfall, what is landfall? And he said to ask Aunt Susan, so she did, and I gave her my lesson for the day. These kids have learned not to ask many questions, but I want to just read what's written about landfall from Wikipedia. Landfall is an incorporation of a manufactured home community contributing to its reputation as the most affordable community in the Twin Cities. In 2008 and 2010, the city was named one of the 100 best communities for young people by America's Promise. America's Promise is they advocate for young people. It is one of only 2 incorporated cities in Minnesota that consist primarily of manufactured housing, including Hilltop. Is that still in your district? Yep, I thought so. The other thing about landfall is that it is the most dense city. And it's landlocked, but I think there's potential for us with LCA grants, if we're creative and out of the box, to look at ways that we can help them. What both landfall and Columbus will need is assistance. They are small communities, very limited staff size, and frankly, sometimes I think our paperwork and our description of our programs can be a little overwhelming. And I know we don't intend it that way, but when you're dealing with a lot to do with a very limited staff, adding more to the plate is hard to do. So I would encourage that. I'd like to say about landfall, they're a part of the goal line. They're going to be a part of the goal line once it's up and running. Their city administrator and their mayor and council members are very active and very engaged. And it's a pretty cool community. Right before I went off the council, was redistricted. I went to a city council meeting, and the attorney for that community helped raise money for a group of residents who wanted to be a part of a soccer program on the east side of St. Paul. And so that shows the kind of commitment when you've got an attorney who doesn't live in that community helping fill the gap in terms of the fundraising for that. The other thing I want to say about Columbus is that it is a growing community, and it's right that there are a lot of permits there. There's also a lot of business development going on there, and I think there may be some potential as it relates to adding jobs. So I would think that Forest Lake, being that it's very close to Columbus probably says Forest Lake is a suburb of Columbus and vice versa, but we might even want to think about other ways for the two communities to partner in getting an LCA grant application in place.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So most of these communities, with the exception of the couple on the Gold Line, most of these communities don't have meaningful transit. And much of the scoring in livable communities, whether real or perceived, is based on transit. Adding in the TOD program brought significant money specifically to transit, but the other livable communities demonstration account also transit projects score very well. And so I think a big part of why these communities that do have growth that are not participating is a feeling of what's the point if we don't have transit. And when you don't have transit, you don't have metro mobility, and you don't have the kind of support that people who are below 30% of AMI need in order to really function, unless they have a strong family or friend group to help them get around. And that's been our focus with the program for the last quite a few years, is below 30% AMI. And these communities may be doing great things at 60% of AMI, but they're not doing it at 30 because they don't have transit. And so we need to acknowledge that if the goal truly is just below 30%, then it's not going to be in these communities.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Chambliss, I'll note that Ellen and Mary Kay allotted, I think you said 3 minutes for this part of the discussion, so.
Mr. Chair, we were fortunate to get a few extra minutes on your agenda
Okay.
because you wrapped up your work early,
Okay,
so
so-
we're not too freaked out yet. but
I will ask you to help us manage our time here, because.
We will do so.
Thank you. So Councilmember Johnson, then Councilmember Chambliss.
I'll be fast. I agree with everything that Wendy said. And I would also just want to mention that, again, some of these are small, fully developed communities. And as we've said before, they have a hard time just updating their comp plan every 10 years. So, I don't know what our expectations are of them. And yet, especially with the comment about transit, I just want to second, third, and fourth that, because in my part of the world, we don't have Metro Transit, but we have two suburban providers. And then, of course, Metro Mobility, and maybe Metro Move is out there now. I'm not sure about that. But I'm also just going to say, there is one small city in my district that had a TOD development, I think it was part of a Hennepin County plan, that is not going to be recommended in the next phase of Network Now. It's going to be removed. So they're actually going to be in the transit taxing district and have all of their transit taken away. So, it's really hard when I meet with my mayors to, get them too excited, depending on where they're at in development and, what they've got, to be able to compete. If we are going to stick at that 30% AMI, I have said this time and time again, I really am a believer in 30% AMI. However, when you get further out, you'll see 30% AMI, but you'll often see 60% or 80%. And those are also workforce housing important, opportunities where, they might be close to a really good paying job and they want to be in the school district and all the things. So I know that Minnesota Housing is, I think, solid at 30. I think Hennepin County is solid at 30. I think that's where we are now. But it is eliminating, I think, the potential of some really good developments that we probably saw come through in our LCA grants in the past, and there might be a chill on that, and I think I said this too in my interview, for some of those communities, like why try?
Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, I think I just kind of want to go back to my original question, and that was related to the community's profile. And I think it's a lot more complex than growth or residential and commercial permits. So I think we've done surveys about why communities are participating or are not participating. So that would provide me with a little bit more information than this particular slide, and that might be kind of why we're asking and responding the way that we are. So I think that's really important is, if we had an ideal community profile that, would meet the criteria for LCA 90% of the time, what does that look like? And then also, is that community ready for the type of program that we're offering? Or is that particular community interested in the type of program that we're offering? Readiness might mean, does that community have the right kind of transportation that what community members could benefit from? Because you're not going to benefit if you can't get around. That's a very good point. And that speaks to readiness. And then I know we've done surveys on interest. Even if they did meet the community profile, are they interested? So if we have an effective survey, that helps us make better decisions as policymakers about whether or not we need to enhance, or how we need to enhance our programs.
Mr. Chair,
Sure, Councilmember Johnson, then Councilmember Carter.
Just on that point. And on that point, I think maybe our staff, or maybe you are into it already or not, but finding out ones that used to be in it, why they aren't into it is extremely important. And to Council Member Chambliss's point, everything in red is really what we're determining that should meet the criteria, and they probably have the resources. So to get back into there and say, why not? That's all I want to add to that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you for doing that profile work ahead and for hearing the need to continue that so that we can have a better understanding of those communities that can help with the goals and that are positioned to be able to do so. It also helps us, as Councilwoman Chambliss or Councilperson Chambliss just said, to identify how to get ready, because I think that is very, very important. And as I listen to the conversation and look at our program and its goals, it just occurs to me that, we clearly have to talk about those goals and understand those goals deeply in terms of what we have today, what we need and what we think we can get. Because I think that as you all who were on the council before me have had these discussions, you've certainly talked about that. You've had deep conversations about the region's needs and how this program could help drive those needs. I haven't Yes, I have. You're going to accuse me of having seen something and saying I haven't, because I haven't interacted as deeply as I would like to with the data and, having a discussion with the council about what we're seeing, what our needs are. We can't possibly meet them. We don't have the resources to meet all of those needs, but we can help, and how we think we can best help. 30% AMI, clearly, because we don't have enough and because that's such a difficult population to serve, to find their own housing, seems to be a sweet spot that we think we can help with. And you're right, others have said that's a sweet spot that they think they can help with, and still we can't do it. Still we can't meet the need. So I think it has to get back to a point where we're not just looking at who's participating, but where we really, really are talking about those goals. What we have today, what we know we need, what we think we can get, and how we use this tool to maximize that. So I don't have all the answers there, but I know that's what we're trying to do. And so I don't want to get lost in the discussion of who's not there. I definitely want to understand who's positioned to help. But I don't want to get lost thinking that, as I said before, everybody ought to be helping us, that everybody, can actually benefit from this program at this point in time. I say that because I know we also need to be looking across the council at not just this program, but all of our programs and resources and how they are distributed. So I don't want to look just through this window and try to meet everybody's needs through this window. Shoot me if that's not what you're thinking, others. But I think we really, really do have to lock in on what are we trying to accomplish rather than who is participating, and look across the plethora of resources that we have on balance to understand how we're helping.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Johnson?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Carter. I really appreciate your perspective. And part of the discussion is coming because we are wondering why our numbers have gone down and what is happening in these communities and why is that the case, even with some outreach, even post-COVID, trying to get a handle on what is happening. And as much as we want to say how they are helping us achieve the region's goals, it's really us trying to help them achieve their housing goals through their comp plan process. And I'm just going to say this, if again, not to get too deep into the 30 AMI, but if that's really kind of that benchmark, and then you add the transit TOD stuff on top of that, we already have eliminated a whole bunch of cities that just are never going to get there. So how do we help them achieve the housing goals of the region when our own programs aren't going to reach them just based on how we've scored in or scored out communities? And I am looking at, this slide here, and I am shocked that I don't have any communities that are on this list, because I have communities that are, they're working their butts off, the ones that can. So this is really helpful to me. And having been a city person and hear from these mayors, they will tell you why they aren't in these programs. And it's pretty basic. And I don't think that I think that if we were able to provide funding for them and help them, they would take it in a heartbeat. But our criteria, I think, really makes it hard because of the limited dollars that we do have. And I just want that on the record, because I hear about it all the time from my cities, not just my district, but beyond.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. I do appreciate this data. I think this is what we've been looking for, to have this conversation. I'm going to toss something in here that's going to complicate things, I think. And I know we're going to get to, I apologize, we're going to get to more breakout sessions as well, where we can go a little deeper. And I just couldn't figure out where to quite fit this in. But on looking at the 10 years of impact, that was on slide 7. And, LCA isn't just for housing. And I suspect that this conversation, as we're looking for how we're going to establish future policies, we're going to kind of get into this housing and jobs kind of economic development dynamic and conversation. And I just look back in the total jobs created has more or less trended to decrease. Housing more or less has tended to increase. And that's just really a broad broad statement. And I guess maybe I don't have a question or anything here, but just to lift that up, and that's going to be part of our conversation as well. And one way to frame it simplistically is, do we have an affordable housing problem or do we have a wage problem that we're trying to address here? So I guess I'm just putting a marker in that because I'll want to get back to it at some point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think that you all want to go where we want to go later in today's agenda, but
Go for it.
We'll put a timestamp on this part of the discussion.
Thank you.
All enormously helpful, and we have some follow-up items that we'll get back to you on, but let's continue with this kind of data snapshot. It's building our common knowledge level about sort of where the program is today.
Thank you.
And I'm hoping we can run through this quickly. So again, using this 10-year timeframe, we took a look at application and award data to see what cities have been applying and who has been more successful in their application. And since 2014, 60 individual cities have applied to the program. 70% of applications have been awarded funds. I will say at the outset, this data tells us nothing about the merits of any particular project. These are just raw numbers. And what we've done in this table is to show the top 15 cities who have had the highest number of awards in this 10-year period. We've organized them by success rate. We also put in some population figures as context here, but we haven't done anything to normalize the application and award data, so you're not seeing anything about like dollars awarded per capita. And the thing I want to point out as the consultant team here is that it didn't seem surprising to us that the region's largest cities had the most awards, because as you can all see, they had the most applications, the largest populations, the most development activity, and they also do that pre-application screening where they're already weeding out the less strong proposals. And so, when I looked at this, one of the things that stood out to me that seemed to be an ingredient for success is a city's willingness to keep putting their hat in the ring and submit an application, because those cities that have submitted more applications, for the most part, not the total part, as you'll see on the next slide, tend to have also been the ones that get the awards. So the next slide is turning to those cities that have had less success. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, so 60 cities have submitted applications in the past 10 years. 12 of those have yet to successfully receive an award. Some of those cities have only submitted one time, but others have tried more than once. And so we also wanted to look at those communities that had submitted at least 6 applications over the past decade, but didn't make that top 15 list. And when we look at some of those, they're that list down below. Some, like Dakota County, Eden Prairie, and Fridley, are having success rates like those in the previous table, but then there are some others, like South St. Paul, Plymouth, and Little Canada, that are struggling to have the same kind of success. And again, we haven't looked at the project applications, but ultimately this suggested to us that there might be an opportunity to do some more targeted outreach to those cities who are trying, but clearly not meeting, the benchmarks to get funded. So that was our point in trying to pull together both application and award data. So I will pause there because that is the last of our quantitative slides.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Oh, thank you. This information is really good, and I'm glad we took the time to get the consultants to dig into all of this information that we've been kind of at different times asking for. The opportunities for the targeted research, having someone from outside the organizations just look at the data without, the political aspects is very helpful. Not saying that, well, whatever. What I was going to say is that, again, I think here we could have some very effective surveying, looking at I know that we've already done some targeted outreach and some targeted surveys, but, what can we do differently with those surveys based on the questions and information that we're talking about today to get us to more, closer to our goals, to have more of an impact towards those goals? Because I think that's, like Councilmember Carter said, that's the bottom line, is how effective are we at meeting our Met Council goals?
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we could dig deeper, and anything that comes before me, and I'm going to be honest, particularly if I've got somebody in my district applying, I am looking to find out why they made it or why they didn't make it. And you heard me ask that tonight. Why didn't they score high enough? That is data that is very important, because if you can start to gather that data, the why not the why did they make it, but why didn't they make it, that score will also tell you where they're falling short of the goals as it relates to potential score to be achieved. And that is what I'm trying to relay, for my communities, is some of the things I've said, because I have talked to these mayors, and they know what we want, but development is very difficult, and layering all the stacks of funding is very difficult, and getting at 30% AMI alone is difficult. You can have market rate and affordable, but I'm just telling you, the data, if you look at a sampling of these, you can probably find out pretty quickly why they're not matching all the ones that are on slides 12. So that I think would be really important for us, because we are the ones that set the criteria and work with staff to set the alignment of score tied to the criteria. And when some of us were new on the council 5 years ago, we were really working towards equity, and we wanted to put in some equity goals and then tie some more robust scoring to that. But we said we'd revisit that, which I think is part of what we're doing today. So I just, that data is sitting there. And I mean, I'd love to just get a sampling of what was going on here. And in a way, you can ask, first of all, you can ask the mayors, but you got to ask the staff or the consultants they've hired, because they're the ones that are putting the apps together. So I just want to put that out there. I can tell you why Plymouth is failing, because I talk with them regularly, but not for tonight.
Thanks. Well, I think we'll get into some of that with the qualitative data report. That's the next section here. Further discussion on this before we move into qualitative? Councilmembers Wolf, Vento, then Carter. Councilmember Wolf.
So on slide 13, there's a lot in common on the list of people or places that have applied and never been successful, and the ones that are no longer participating. So, I mean, there's not like it's any surprise that there's a big overlap there. Even when I look at the communities within my district that have been successful in the past, their grants are for things that are not as likely to be funded under the current scoring system, which also has impact on whether or not they're going to apply or be a participant in the program.
Thank you. Councilmember Vento.
Another one of my former communities, Little Canada, stands out, having applied 5 times and not been awarded. They are a community that's in the midst of growing a lot. There's transit there. There's a very definite need, both in terms of residential as well as economic development, and they've got great staff. I'd take time to go back and work with them if I could, because that's one community that I've always really appreciated a lot. They're just a very engaged group, and I'm feeling extraordinary Irish Catholic guilt right now to see the number 5 in parentheses behind the name of Little Canada. I feel like I dropped the ball.
And I'll just note this is over 10 years, so you haven't been here.
Only half the ball.
I dropped half the ball.
Okay. All right, thanks. And Councilmember Carter, and then let's see if we can move on to the qualitative section, data section. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. I do appreciate that the efforts that have been occurring over these past few years have shown less receptivity or less successfulness from a number of the cities that had participated in the past or that could be participating currently. And, you know, I too would like to see that greater participation. I do think that this is the revisiting, and I'm thankful for that. One of the things I'd like to hear more about is why they think they're not successful. You know, as we look at the goals that have been sent out, and as you say, Judy, you talk with them a lot, and you know why they think they're not successful. I don't. I'd really like to hear that and the alignment with what we're trying to achieve. And as we look at what we're trying to do, it's about the region. You know, it is about the cities in our region, and you're right, helping them with the sense that we can see some needs that we're trying to address in various categories and ways. I'd like also to know not just the numbers, you know, of projects that we've completed or, you know, of jobs. I'd like to look back again at how we iterated data around our success. You know, what does success mean? And as we look at those measurements, how do we measure up? It can't be just in numbers of houses. You know, it's got to be about outcomes for people. That is what I'm assuming. But I'd love us, if we're revisiting and really wanting to recreate this work so that we are able to help more, I'd like us to make sure that the helping more means helping more people across all our communities to achieve the goals that we really want to see. So again, I'm asking ignorant questions because I wasn't there at that time, but I'm willing to embarrass myself so that we can rediscover together what we are trying to achieve.
Thank you, Councilmember. These are excellent questions. So ready to move into the qualitative, and it might start touching, I think, on some of what we're talking about here. Please, Ellen.
Go fast.
All right, we're going to try to go really fast here. So the next part is really around what we have seen in the meeting minutes, the surveys from cities and developers, and our interviews with most of the members of this committee. And as Ellen said at the outset, as your neutral third-party outside pair of eyes, what we are discovering is that there is some friction around how the program is being implemented and what its goals are. And one of the biggest challenges we see is that the committee doesn't seem to have shared agreement on what the program's trying to accomplish. And we also understand why this is happening. At the outset, you've got the authorizing legislation, the Livable Communities Act, that tells the council to establish criteria that is both consistent with the act, and at the same time, it is telling the council to consider the policies of the Metropolitan Development Guide. And as I'm sure you all know, you have dozens of policies. There are dozens. The team has even mapped like how 28 different policies impact the LCA program. So it begs the question, which do you lean into, which don't you lean into? How do you choose a way that honors the authorizing legislation but also honors the goals of the development guide? It's hard, and we have seen that play out. And again, as the, folks that are a little bit less in the day-to-day of this, we wanted to go back to the source language in the Livable Communities Act and found that, it does provide a solid starting point for how to think about the program that's meant to foster regional goals implemented at the local level. And, it was interesting to see, it is very clear that this is an incentive program to encourage cities to do things that are aligned with the region. It's also very clear that in the legislation, they were thinking about things might look a little bit different in different community types. There There were the 4 key areas that the LCA is concerned about. I won't read those to you, you know them. And then there were the 5 key areas that specific to the LCDA program that there was, the act talks about the interrelation of both development and transit, of housing and areas of opportunity, mixing incomes, whether that's at the project level or at the community level, and encouraging public infrastructure investment. So the last thing I will say here is that, the statutory language isn't rigid. It suggests that the council should also be looking at its regional policies and that it should be evolving as needs and priorities change. And, we all know that since the LCA was passed, the world has changed, the region has changed, our knowledge has changed. I think there is both an acknowledgement that you started to see in Thrive that not every person in every community has operated from the same starting place. The public sector's increased its commitment to addressing those inequities, and through this process, we've designed new programs, new application language, new scoring rubrics, and all of these things are both a blessing and a curse. Over the years, there have been new components while the funding pot has stayed the same. You've got 9 different programs, about $28 million. The larger funding ecosystem has changed, and it's not clear to us how that's taken into consideration. And again, none of this is a good or bad thing. It just is, and it leads to friction when people have a different sense of what the priorities are. So that is our view, sitting out here watching you all and reading lots of surveys. So I'm going to turn it over to Ellen to guide us through the remaining activities.
Thank you. And I think it's important to note here that over the course of the last several years in particular, staff has done a significant amount of outreach to cities. They have done surveys to some of your questions earlier. Some of you participated in workshops just in August with metro cities that hosted and invited particularly cities that weren't typical award recipients. They targeted those so that we could hear that voice, and we were able to sit in on those conversations. We read previous surveys of developers, of counties, and other stakeholders. And so I think over the course of the year, over the course of the last several years, you've seen staff try to take that feedback and adjust going forward. So that's why, they shifted from a 2-step scoring process to a 1-step. That was largely the result of feedback. And they made other adjustments. And so there has been sort of an attempt at kind of continual improvement and continual refinement. We may be at the point where there's been so much that that's also contributed on top of the policy layers to there being a little bit more confusion than is actually helpful. And so we looked at that feedback, but then, as you all know, we did come and meet individually with many of you, and those conversations were enormously helpful. And what we learned is that in general, you all have a fairly common vision of the intent or the purpose of LCA, which is actually on the next slide, but it doesn't matter so much. But what we also, the theme that came clearest to us was that this question, and you've all said it here multiple times already, we don't have a good set of goals. And it's not about one goal. The program can do multiple things. So we don't want to frame this in terms of a binary choice. It can do multiple things. But the question is, how can you, as stewards of this fund, ensure that it's doing, that your funds, your investment is having the greatest impact? You get to define impact as policymakers, but that was really clear from our conversations. That was also clear from those other stakeholders. Other folks are confused too. Are you primarily interested in jobs? Are you primarily interested in equity? Are you primarily interested in 30% AMI? All relevant questions, all great goods, common goods that we as a community want to see, but we have to have an understanding of sort of what are you really driving toward? And so that and this participation question, that question of how do the funds get spread around the region? how do we help cities help us achieve those regional goals? Really, those are the kind of two fundamental questions that we felt we kind of have to get further in our thinking as a group around those questions before we can get into further details around sort of program design and so forth. So you'll see on slides, I think starting on 22, there's more detail summarizing the interviews we had with all of you in additional areas of both agreement and tension, but we didn't want to take our time talking about that. So we want to really talk about sort of the key tensions. And as I said, we think these are not either or questions, but we're pointing out areas where we're not in alignment. And what we're hoping to do today is say, have you help us figure out, well, what are some possible paths forward? Where do we need more information? How do we, within the statutory and policy framework, how do we ensure that the impacts we have are consistent with the values that you all bring to this? So again, as policymakers, your job, you get to decide some of this. So, you need to satisfy the statutory requirements, but we're looking for areas where we can get to a point where we have a level of agreement, probably not unanimous agreement, but some level of agreement that you all can say, okay, this is what is important to us as we shape this program. And so what we want to do is take the next 20 minutes or so and have you respond to these key tensions. And what we're going to do is we've posted them over there. We'll move those around. We're going to ask you to go up and grab a marker and write out some of your thoughts. I want to just review these tensions with you right now, though, to make sure you're clear on what we think we're seeing and if there are others. I think one that may have emerged earlier is that preservation question. And so we'll maybe add that or workshop that at another time. But some of the things that we heard was that, and you all have touched on most of these today, is that idea of dispersing funds across the region and addressing greatest need. We've heard that housing projects should focus on the deepest affordability, like 30%, but we've also heard that in some communities, it isn't so much 30% AMI that makes sense for that community, it's maybe 60% or something else. And so how do you begin to think about both of those things being possible? We know equity criterion scoring is important and that we've asked people to respond in their applications to how they are thinking about equity. But we also know that for some communities that it has a different flavor than it does for core and inner ring suburbs and how they think about equity. And that we know that some projects, and I think Councilmember Johnson brought this up, some projects in a community can have a catalytic impact and that would just be enormous, but maybe doesn't quite fit with the scoring criteria we have today. And we heard this in the interviews. People desire both flexibility, but we also know we want to be accountable. So it's those sort of two things that we're trying to balance. And then that transit question, which you all put a pretty fine point on. How do you reward transit and connection in communities that don't have transit? So with that, did we put a point on some of what you all have been thinking and feeling?
Yes.
Okay, there may be more. We'll add more, but I'm just going to go for it then and ask you all to, we'll stand up. There's 6 key tensions that we've framed. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Dalton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. One tension that I think I'm just going to name, as I listen to this and I look back at the slides in the presentation, is the purpose of LCA and the creation of LCA. So when I think about the North Star of the LCA program, the statute is fairly clear. And when I think about the role of Met Council, and the land use guidance that we do every 10 years, that feels like a tension, the fact that we are a regional planning body, and more often than not, communities feel like we're mandating policies around land use, which is a tool within our toolbox. And then this program was created in a way to incentivize or support that compliance. And so I feel like that's been a tension that I've heard subtly here and there. And so when you said 28 different policies that touches, that was one big policy question I had is that, like, is that the North Star, sort of for me? That's for me, to my fellow council members.
Yeah. And can I just add one thing
Councilman
more
Johnson.
briefly? But I think that we have to really go up about 10 or 15 layers, and I'm just gonna go back to council governance. I mean, we show up here, and I have some areas that I have more knowledge in others, and yet I might be on a committee where I'm like, boy, my learning curve is gonna be very steep here. And not just for CDC, but for every committee. And think about it, about every two election cycles or so, we get all wiped out, and, staff has to start over again with about 80% new people. And then, we might be in the middle of some of this, or adopting a big transportation project into the TPP or whatever. And that impacts this as well, because it's about consistency and fluidity and some certainty. And, we do this. I remember my first 3 years on the council. I mean, we were like a ping pong ball, in a good way, energy and people and wanting. And, I just remember some of those. And now I'm like, okay, now I can reflect, because now I've even got more experience. So I just have to add that in. If somebody ever wants to ask, once I'm done, or any of us are done, ask an actual council member, what are some of the challenges? It's just ramping up to actually give staff what they need, because that one slide talks about council member, city, and staff partnerships and relationships. And some of us are like, deer in the headlights for, I hope that's an okay phrase to say anymore. I'm really trying to stop saying phrases. But you know what I mean? I think we have to acknowledge that too. We come into these roles and we hit the ground running, and it's a lot. So I'm still learning in this committee every day. And, some of these city people are also in that same cycle. So I just had to put that out there. Governance also is a thing.
Yeah. We know, sorry.
Please, Ellen.
It's
complicated.
Sure. All right, yes, totally agree. We noted that as well, governance issues and the remit to this committee in particular in terms of its oversight role. But I think at the same time, we don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And you all as citizens are giving tremendous amounts of time and doing the best you can. And I think we're here to help make it a little better. Help you feel more comfortable, help provide the information that'll be useful to you. So this is the co-creation point of our discussion. So if you'll, what we're going to ask you to do is go over and write down what questions do these tensions raise for you? What ideas do you have? What additional information would you like to help you wrestle with this? And we'll be coming back to you in October for, I think, the full 2 hours. But we don't want to just walk in with a blank slate. We want to get your early thinking now. How do you begin to think about these friction points? Does that make sense? So this is an individual activity. There's 6 spots, so you can take turns. You can just jot questions. Come on, join me over here. Don't look so.
Get up.
It's a good time to stretch.
It's freezing.
I promise it'll be okay.
I'm like, I should. I think I
Sarah,
should
we'll
write.
do this first. Okay, it's not, you all can, yeah. So there's one there, and then there's this over here.
Or then either side.
No, just this one has 2, and that one has 2. So they're different. Councilmember Wolf.
Oh, do you want us to use different colors?
No, it doesn't. It will not be tracked.
Pens?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
It's, what am I supposed to write?
What ideas, questions? So, do you think this is like super important? Do you think that, here you go. So, you can just pick one. We're not tracking colors. So is there information you want to know? I don't know. We should have assigned this as homework. There might be homework. There's nothing in the back. Okay, I'm gonna write something out.
You know, I'm gonna write the.
Go for it. Don't even, it's not relevant. For all your things, I mean.
Yeah.
I don't know. No.
Yeah.
Tech started working at least, right? Your slides have been working.
You can write more than one thing on each friction point too.
This is good.
So again, your ideas, your reactions,
Can't solve it for them. We could all like.
other information you want.
But like, it's not gonna be. It just is.
Because somehow we have to frame, how do we move forward as a group? Again, maybe not 100% agreement, but we have to, you know the adage, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So we have to at least figure out if we're on the same road.
Yeah. Well, we'll break them at 5 too. And ask.
I was supposed to describe this tension, or if this is try to find some words actually. Okay.
I think I took up more than my share of
We have extra
space.
paper, so not to worry.
I think we let people go till 5:55.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible.
October 7th.
Maybe we can do that program thing with some of the options on the website. I think we should just get 2 hours with staff. That's a great plan. There's flexibility where 30% is, maybe it's based on population or something. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but like. But that's what. It'd be nice to be able to put this on the summit. Because otherwise we're just bringing something. Non-urgency.
And I hate not wearing a watch.
5:50. I can tell you when it's 5:55.
don't have to write big if it's easier to write small.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're a former elementary teacher, you do it. No, I didn't mean you specifically. And there's one over here laying flat. It's not on the easel. I keep forgetting those.
Yeah. I know. I mean, part of it is, if we move in that direction, we'll be incredibly unpopular with the affordable housing advocates, right? Right, but we only have X amount, of resources, so I would just assume decide that. Oh, we're talking about, oh, I'm sorry, housing versus jobs.
Well, and for me, we always talk about, maybe more affordability, more somebody, and I say this, what are we doing as far as wages? We don't control, we do as a Met Council.
We're subsidizing employees.
Everybody's looking at government's office and pointing a finger at their guidance. No, those are. But I mean, that's hard for us as people to do solution when we're not really, to your point, we don't have all houses.
It's almost like a movement, right? We have to educate the community. Everyone just likes to point at government. Like, oh, fix the affordable, yeah, right. And say, hey, we're subsidizing your workforce. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're getting into this. It's been frustrating as chair of this committee that I feel like we can't iterate and say, what does that say about my leadership?
These are sneaky
issues.
Yeah, I just think this, we have to do this.
Right, we have to figure it out for ourselves, right? And then the next council can go along and scrap it all. That's what I was thinking of doing, just sort of checking or something, I like that.
Thank you.
I just have these sketchy thoughts.
Oh, you have tomorrow.
If you have other thoughts, but it's now.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
Some foundation. That makes sense. Yeah, I think this is, you know, if that's easy.
Yeah, no, we're not.
If I can.
Yeah.
No, this senior housing is huge. And I just feel terrible.
But we can't think of it as just senior, because it's a life cycle, because it opens up housing for others.
Exactly.
So we gotta make
Exactly. When my grandmother moved out of her beautiful home, a young family moved out.
exactly.
And she went into an apartment, she was very happy there.
She got the resources.
And eventually, she got moved into a nursing home care facility that my dad helped build in this little town. We got to look it up and so really get some care.
Yeah, yeah.
He knew that we really needed it. That was 40 years ago.
Yeah, we all.
I'm gonna speak with the chair about this plan. I'm going with you.
Are you walking?
One thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
We're not saying because.
Okay.
So you can adjourn whenever you want.
And then everything is what I can talk to Lisa. I mean, I think people are really benefiting from this crunchy workshop.
With arthritis.
I was just talking to them, what it says about that we can create.
Got a lot of walks
We're
on these
clumsy.
gorgeous days this weekend, so, man, it was a
What
fabulous
does it say
weekend.
about me as a
And it's
chair?
Were you up at the lake?
Yes.
This is the kind of stuff.
Was it ever? You know, and now I have my deck soon. Deck. You know, I've been complaining about this deck for a whole year, right? Well, we got it redone. It's all
Isn't that
done.
great?
Yeah, it really is. So now I'm trying to party on the deck. Somebody called it a dance floor. It's not that.
Well, you're a council member, I almost didn't love it. Weekend, it was too crowded.
But I was in Cleveland all last week. And,
You what?
I was in Cleveland.
may be homework.
Oh,
A
wow.
work project all last week.
Lisa, what do you want to do to wrap this up?
I was ready to chill out.
Would you all do some homework if we did you?
I think so. I think people would be willing to do
All
some.
right, we'll send it.
Finish.
I mean, this is a great start, right?
Mr. Chair, if I could suggest that folks speak at the microphones for the purposes of our audience,
Sure.
that would be great.
Yeah, it works.
And then we can wrap up from here.
So would committee members be willing to do some homework?
Yes.
Ellen, what are you suggesting?
Ellen, what are you?
Mary Kay or Ellen?
Sorry for chit-chatting.
No, that's all right.
Oh, geez, homework? Are we gonna be graded and tested?
I think if you were willing to do it, we would send these questions out to you again.
Okay.
And if you could add anything, and we'll also share what we've captured today. And then we'll be getting back to you with a plan for our time together on October 7th as well.
Is that cool?
Yeah, thank
Committee
you. You guys
members
are
cool?
great.
Thank you very much, Ellen, Mary Kay, for this work. I think it's really helpful. I think this is moving us in a good direction, and we'll get to some agreement, right? And we're shooting for the 2025, right? Distribution plan. Thank you. And I think this is what this committee has wanted to do, right? Get a little crunchier, munchier on how we get ready for the distribution plan approval. Yeah, Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At first, when I heard that we were going to get a consultant, I was kind of like, what? but it's actually been great to have an outsider who can
Agree.
knock down the barriers and the people's, personal feelings are left out of it.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for that observation. I really appreciate your support. And we're dealing with layers, layers that have built up over decades, right?
Yes.
And so how do we kind of approach it with fresh eyes? And it's very helpful.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say too, this is the A team.
Yeah, excellent.
So when I found out that they were hired, I know, now staff is also the A team, but because they have to work together, but their plates are so full and they're deep into it every day too, that I think between all of us and again, I encourage people, tell your cities what we're up to and have coffee with them. Good, bad, or indifferent, they'll probably have something to say.
Something to say.
Especially around some of the questions we're asking. We've done some pre-work on that, or you guys have, but it's always good to just get their take, because even in my 11 cities, I must have 11 different opinions.
Sure, right.
You know.
So cool. Anything else? Anything, Michelle?
No, I have nothing.
Nope. Seeing no further business before us, we're adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.